Tov today, Chodesh Tov, Boker Tov, a good Arab Shabbos. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Kamma Tzadi Tes 99, and it's dedicated for a Shmira for the Chayalim, Atzalah for the Shvuyim, and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael. We're on the bottom line of Tzadi Chesam Abayz. Rav Asi has introduced us to the Chiddush that is Uma Kona B'Shvach Kli, that if a craftsman gets utensils and he's told to make something, and he turns the wood into a utensil, and then he breaks the utensil, he doesn't have to pay the value of the utensil back. He just has to pay the value of the wood or the materials back because he acquired the utensil by virtue of his creation. And so that's the Chiddush of Rav Asi. So comes along the Gemara on the bottom line of 98b. Let's bring a proof for Rav Asi from the following Mishnah, which God willing we'll get to on Shabbos' daf. Hanosin semer with saba, somebody who gives wool to the dyer to dye, top of tzadi tes and aleph, the ktichu yoreh, and the pot and the dyer on his own burnt the wool and the dye in the pot. No singlo on top of 99a, no singlo demate tomorrow. We give him, under these circumstances, he has to pay back the value of the wool. So we see demate tomorrow in, he has to pay back the value of the wool. Demate tomorrow vishivcho, well, he does not have to pay back the value of the wool with the dye on it, the colored wool, which was worth more money. Lav, aren't we talking about a case that after it already, after the color had changed the color of the wool, then he burnt the pot and ruined the wool? Shma mina, and don't we see from here that the material had been transformed, then he only has to pay back for the wool. Shma mina uman kone b'shvach kli. Don't we see from here that the craftsman has acquired it with the shevach of the utensil, that he's acquired it? And this is therefore a proof for Rav Asi. Comes along Shmuel and says no. Amar Shmuel hachamay eskinan kigon sheiticho b'shas nafila teweka shevacha. Now we're talking about a case here where automatically got ruined right when it fell in, that it never was improved, and that's why he has to pay back for the wool. But if it got ruined after the dye had already clung to the wool, then what would you say? No single demate tomorrow, v'shivcho. Then indeed, Shmuel would seem to indicate that he would have to pay him back for the wool and also the dye. Isn't that what Shmuel is saying? That the Uman is not Konev b'Shavach Kli, because he'd have to pay him back for everything. So Lema Shmuel waits later Rav Asi. Can we see proof from here that Shmuel does not hold like Rav Asi? So the Gemara says, no, Amar Shmuel, Hachamay Eskina, what we're talking about here is Kigon, the Tzemer v'Siman and the Balabayis. No, we're talking about here where the wool and the dye were both owned by the that both owned by the person who owned the wool. He didn't just own the wool, he also gave him the dye. Look at Rashi. Hamas nisin demashman the high hikdiach achanachila yavle nami dmei shivchei. This Mishnah, which implies that if it had burnt after the dye had gone onto it, he would give him also he would have to pay him for the new material, the new item that he created. That's when the wool and the dye both belonged to the original owner. Because in this case, clearly you're just hiring the dyer to be a hired worker. He doesn't own any aspect of it. He's just a hired worker, so there he doesn't acquire it. And Vadai Uman Sha Samanan Shalo Kona B'Shevach Kli Ve'im Sham Od Made tomorrow. Clearly, Shmuel would say that if the craftsman owned the dye, then he does acquire it, and then he would only have to pay the wool. But in this case, he didn't own anything. So that's what Shmuel is saying. The Summer of a Siman in the Balabais. Vitzava Agir Yade Hudeshako. So the dyer was just getting paid basically as a hired worker. Agir Yade Hudeshako. He's just getting paid to be like a hired worker. And so therefore that's why he has to pay him back for everything. Well, then it's imprecise because why does it say you should pay him back for the wool? You should pay him back for the wool and the dyes. Now, Shmuel the Chuya Kamadach. So Gemara says, okay, Shmuel is not really arguing with Rav Asi. He was just trying to show you why why this Mishnah is not a proof for Rav Asi, and it's not an indication of what Shmuel himself, what his opinion is. Tashma, another attempt to prove that to disprove Rav Asi. We weren't in the Brisa. Hanosin taliso uman. Let's say you give your garment to a craftsman. You give your material to a craftsman to turn into a garment. Gamro, he completes the work, Vodio, and then he tells him about it, but he keeps the pledge with him. Fil mikan vadasar yamim. Eino overlove mishum lo tolen. Then even if he keeps it with him from here until 10 days, he's not going to be in violation of the prohibition of lo solen. He's not in violation of that prohibition. And what's the prohibition of lo solen? That you have to pay your worker on time. But in this case, since he's kept it with him, then he's not going to be considered like he's completed the job. But once he gives it to him, even in the middle of the day, once the sun sets, over of Misham Baltaan. Once the day is over, this was the agreement they made, then he's in violation of Baltaan as long as he doesn't pay him back. But if you're going to say that the craftsman has acquired it by turning it into a utensil, and by over Mishum Baltawan, then he's not a hired worker. It's his own craft that he's selling to him. So why is he in violation of this prohibition of Baltawan? So Amar Mari Breder of Kahana, what we're talking about here is not a proof. We're talking about a Garda Disarbula. Rashi says, Flukir, that's a French word, Flukir Begadim, meaning to say that this was a person who he hired the worker to just comb out the clothes. He's not actually making a new garment. And so therefore, that's why he's entitled to be paid right away. He's basically a hired worker. The Gemara says, but still, why did he give it to him? Or he gave it to the craftsman to soften it. Well, keeping the rekuche, hainu shivcha. So since he gave it to him to soften, well, that's actually the value of turning it into a new utensil. So the Gemara says, no, he hired him to step on it. That Rashi says, Polarush, Balaz. He hired him and he said to him, I'll give you basically a specific amount of money for each time you step on it. And then he's considered a hired worker, and he's not like a person who's hired for a contract, but he's a hired worker. And so therefore, he hasn't acquired it by stepping on it. One coin for each step. The Hainus Clearest, that's his fee. So the Gemara says, okay, fine, still, but but what was the Havamina? Duo Agri Labiche, that he was not that he was hired for each kick, but that he was basically acquiring it with his work. Misaile Rav Sheshes. Well, then maybe according to our Havamina, which was what we thought the case was talking about, maybe it's a proof for Rav Sheshes' position. That they once asked Rav Sheshes, the Bami name Rav Sheshes, Kabwanos over Mishum Baltawan, that if he is a Kabwan, is he going to be in violation? Do you have to pay the worker on time? Baltawan, Eino over. Marmu Rav Sheshes over. Rav Sheshes says you're in violation of Baltawan, and since that's what we thought our case was referring to initially, that it's talking about the case of a Kabwan. And still we said he was going to be in violation of Baltan. So isn't that a support for Rav Sheshes? The Gemara says, Rav Sheshes pleaded to Rav Asi. Do you want to say that Rav Sheshes is arguing with Rav Asi? Because Rav Sheshes is saying he hasn't really acquired it, and that's why he's going to be in violation of Baltan. The Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, Baracha, no. When did Rav Shesha say that a kabbalah and you're in violation of al talent? That's not in a case where you created a new utensil. That's where you hired him to do a specific job. It's shlicha de igarta. Like you said, I'm going to give you $100 to deliver the mail. So there, he's not being paid by the hour; he's being paid by the job, but he's not creating a new product. So it's not necessarily the case that he's arguing with Rav Asi. So now the Gemara says, "Well, lema ketanai." Let's say that this machokes, this position of Rav Asi about whether or not an uman is kona b'sheva kli, is actually machokes tanaim. How so? Let's say a woman says, "Asali shirayim nizamin v'tabalos, make for me this jewelry, v'akadesh lecha, and I'll become married to you if you do that." Kivin sha'asan. She says, basically make these bracelets, these rings, these nose rings, these rings, and I'll become betrothed to you. Once he does it, mikudeshes. Rebbe Meir. Meir says that she is betrothed once he makes it. Chacham say she's not betrothed until the money reaches her hand. We'll have to see what that means. So the Gemara asks the question, my mammon, what does it mean until the money reaches her hand? If you want to say it's that specific money, if you want to say that that's what it's referring to, we called Rabbi Meir Savar Oso Mammon. Whoa, mean to say that Rabbi Meir would say even when that money reaches her hand, she's not betrothed. That doesn't make any sense. How could it be? So what does it mean if you want to say that? You mean to say that Rabbi Meir is saying that she's betrothed even before the money reaches her hands, only once the guy does the work? It doesn't make sense. According to Rabbi Meir, how would she be betrothed under those circumstances? So Ela Pshita my mamon acher. So it means that Rabbi Meir, the Chachamim say, Rabbi Meir says she's betrothed, and the Chachamim say no, he has to give her other money. That she's not being betrothed with that money. So if that's the case, Visavruah, so the people in the yeshiva assumed the Kuli Alma Yeshna Laslira Mitchilatzov. There's going to be several disputes here. That everybody is at the position that when you hire a worker to do something, that each moment he's working for you, basically you owe him money for the amount of work that he's done, and it's automatically transferred into a loan. And so therefore, let me read the Rashi. Rashi explains it. Kivin sha'ala schara pruta. Once he's done a pruta's worth of work, nischayvalo miyad pruta. So therefore, she immediately has to pay him the pruta. Malva gaba, and therefore it's a loan with respect to her. Milav de uman kone b'shevachli, and we're not for the fact that the craftsman has acquired this by turning into a utensil. Mishum schirus, on account of his work. Mishum schirus lo nema Rabbi Meir de Tiskadesh, Tamakadesh b'melva and Makudeshes. You can't, meaning to say, Rameir, you can't betroth something with a loan. So therefore, so what's he doing? He's acquired the utensil. The milva lo tzanit milva eina ve'ein. So because you can't betroth with a loan because we assume that the loan is no longer there. Ela mishum nekasavar must be the Rameirs of the position that the uman kona b'sheva kli, that the craftsman has acquired it. And when she gives it to him, when he gives it to her, he's betrothed her with the shevach, with the fact that it's now its utensil. That which he owns. Even though he doesn't give her any other money. Whereas the Rabbanan of the position, lo kani, Rabbanan of the position, no, that a craftsman has not acquired it. Rabbanan say you have to give her other money. She's not betrothed with that money. So therefore, going back to the Gemara, so El Pshita my mammon acher. So everybody says that the money that he's working for, that's a loan. And so therefore he can betroth her with this or that. The Kuli Alma and everybody's at the position, Amikadesh b'malvein and Mekadeshes, that he can't, even though that money that he's working for was a loan, he can't betroth her with the loan. So must be, my lab, what are they arguing? They're arguing about whether or not a craftsman can acquires utensil when it goes up in value. Or ain uman kona b'sheva kli. according to the Rameir is on the position, and so therefore he could just give her back the utensil, and he betroths her. Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan on the position, and the Rabbanan say, no, you don't acquire the crafts, the object, and so therefore he can't betroth her, he has to give her other money. Rameir says, no, that's not the case. Well, the Kuli Alma ain't Uman Kona Meshavakli. Even Rameir says that the craftsman doesn't acquire it. So therefore, what are they arguing about? They're arguing about whether or not she is in fact owing money for every second that he works. He only owes him money when he returns it to her, and so therefore it's not a loan. He says returns it to her, and now this money that I'm giving you, and that you don't pay me for this work, that's what you're betrothing me for. So that's what Meir is saying. Rabbanan say yesh l'sliros min chil vatsof, and Rabbanan say no, the whole way along she owed him money, and so therefore it's a loan. Or alternatively, everybody says that she owes him money the whole way. They're arguing whether or not you could actually betroth with a loan. The mayor says you could. You could betroth with a loan, but even though she owes him money, that's a valid loan. That's a valid betrothal. Rabbanan say you can. Or alternatively, Rava Amar on the top of 99b, he says the Kuli Alma Yeshno Eschiris Mitchil Vatzov. Rava says no, everybody says that she owes him money all along the way. And so therefore the Kuli Alma Makadesh B'Melva Eina Mekudesha. So it's a loan, but everybody says you can't betroth with the loan. With the Kuli Alma Ein Uman Kona Meshevakli, and he hasn't acquired the object. Ela Hachamay Eskinan. What's the argument? The argument is Kagon Shahosef on Nofach Mishalo. Remember the word Nofach, that's from one of the stones that the Kohen Gadol had in his garment. So he adds on to the object that she gave him, the materials. He adds on a small stone. So Remeir Savar Malve. So he's returning. She owes him money, but he adds on a pruta. He adds on a little penny, and daita pruta. Therefore, she notices this stone, and she's betrothed with it. Rabbanan Savri Malve pruta daita Malve. No, she's focused on the loan, and therefore she's not mekudeshes unless he gives her on other money. Ubeputa dani tonight, and this dispute also relates to a different dispute. Tanya that if a man says to the woman, you're betrothed to me with the payment that I did for you, she's not going to be betrothed because that's like a loan. But if he says to her, in the work that I'll do for you, mikudeshes, then she will be betrothed because that's not a loan. So therefore that's Eino L'Schiris Al B'Sof. Whereas Rabbi Nassan says B'Schar She'aseimach Eino Mekudeshes. Rabbi Nassan says that's also not a betrothal because he says that Neishno L'Schiris Mitchil Vatsof. So the whole time she owes him money. V'Kol Shekei Mishchar She'asiti Imach. And for sure, in the work that I already did for you. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda Anasi says Be'emes Amru. Well, the work I did for you or the work that I will do for you, either way, she's not betrothed. And if he adds on a small coin, so she's betrothed. So what's the difference between Tana Kamma and Rabbi Nassan? The difference between the Tana Kamma and Rabbi Nassan will be this case of Schirus. They're going to argue if he says, I'm going to pay you only at the end, and therefore it's not a loan. Or do we say that Schirus is from beginning to end, and it's a Mekadesh with a loan, it's not a Mekudeshes? And what's the difference between Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? Their argument is exactly this case, where you do a loan, but you add on a pruta. What is she focused on, and whether or not it's a valid betrothal? So now the Gemara brings, since we're talking about craftsmen who mess up, the Gemara brings another case about that. Amar Shmuel, the following circumstance. Tabach Uman, let's say you have a butcher who's an expert, Shekilkel, and he messed up the Shlita. Then under those circumstances, Chayev, that if he's a craftsman and he messed it up, he's responsible to pay. And for sure, Rashi says if he's a hedjot, because he shouldn't have done the Shlita in the first place. He's not an expert. Maziku Posheyahu. He's a damager and he's also negligent. So we have Naseh Ka'omerlo. It's as though we view this person, it's as though it was said to him, Shlot li mikan, v'shachar lo mikan. It's as though we said to him, slaughter here, and he slaughtered on the other side. So the Gemara asks the question, why does Shmuel have to say maziku posheya? Why does he have to say he's a mazik and he's also posheya? He's damager and he's also negligent. If he just said he's a damager, I might have said, when is he a damager? Only if he was being paid. This is the law of our Parshas Mishpatim. That if somebody is a hired worker, he's responsible for own sin, and if somebody for accidents, and if somebody is doing it for free, he's responsible for negligence. That's this week's Parshas Mishpatim. The mazik chayev ba'onsim, the ad muad la'olam, that that a mazik is always responsible for accidents, because the person is always a muad, beim shogu meim mezid. And so from the fact that we call him mazik, we say he's responsible even for an accident. So therefore, if he's a shomer sachar, he says do this for money, he's responsible. But he's also telling us pusheyahu, that he's negligent, that it's not considered an accident, but it's negligence, because he should have said, I can't do it. So that's what the Gemara says. If it just said he was a mazik, I would have said, when is he responsible? Only if you're paying him, because then he's not exempt for an accident. Well, but if he did it for free, I might have said he's not responsible. We see from here that he's negligent. He's negligent. Why doesn't he just say posheya? Because he wants to say. That's just the method in which he wants to teach it. Not only is he a mazik, but he's also a posheya. That's how the Rosh explains it. Rav Kamma bar Guria Shmuel. So Rav Kamma bar Guria says to Shmuel, he challenges this. I know it's a meimo tabach. So, and he's going to say that only that he's just a mazik and not a posheya. That's the question, basically. And if you give the animal to the butcher, the nibwa, and the butcher ruins it, if it would be an uman, he's potter. And if he would be a hedjot, he's chayev. If he would be a craftsman, if he's paid, presumably, he's exempt. But if he was a regular person, in which case he's negligent, then he's responsible. If he pays him money, bein hedjot, bein uman chayev. So if he would be paid money, then whether he's a regular, a non-expert, or an expert, he's responsible. And so we see from this price that if an expert slaughters it, if he does it for free, he's going to be exempt. So why does Shmuel say that the expert is responsible even if he does it for free? So Amarle, so he said to him, La'akar mochach, may your brain become akur, muddy. So he says, you don't know what you're talking about. So also only Rabbanan Kamos of us, another student came and asked Shmuel the same question. Now that you took the same wrong approach that your friend took, I said to you, my position was like Rabbi Meir, meaning to say, I was following the position of Rabbi Meir, and you said the position of Rabbanan. Meaning to say, why don't you infer from that which I said? What did I say? Maziku posheyahu. I said he's a mazik, and he's also posheya. He's a damager. He's also negligent. Nasik omaro shlot milikan v'shachol mikan. Man isli haisfar. Who's the one who says that if you say slaughter for me on one side, it's like he slaughtered on the other side? That who's the one who's saying he's both a mazik and a posheya? That's Rabbi Meir da Amar, who says the Rabbi Meir says that that a person should have known, and therefore he's responsible. And so therefore he should have been more precise. And so therefore I'm not following the position of the Rabbanan. I'm following the position of Rabbi Meir. So you brought me a question from a brisa of the Rabbanan. So hi Rabbi Meir, where does Rabbi Meir say that he should have been more precise? If you want to say it's the following Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir, now we're going to review a lot of Bava Kamma already. If remember the Rabbi Meir that said on Daf Mem Hey Kishar Baal of the Mosera that the owner takes the ox and ties him up with a string. V'nafal b'fanav karoi, and the ox fell down, if he tied him up and then it fell down and the ox goes out, If he ties up the ox and he locks the door, Meir says in both cases he's responsible, even though he locked it up. And presumably he's saying he should have been more precise. He should have locked it even with a shmiram ula, with an excellent watching. Meir says, Hasam Mekrai Pligi. That's not a lot. That's just the verse. There, Rabbi Meir is based upon the fact that it's Exeris HaKosav. Elah, Rabbi Meir, maybe it's the following Meir that we learned in the next Mishnah. The Tanan, let's follow Adam Mitzvah Shachar. Shachar Tzvah Adam, Rameir Omer Nosen when the made tomorrow. Then in the case where you hired him to do it red and he did it black, or black and he did it red, Rameir says you have to pay for the wall. And what's the reason of Rameir? Because he should have been more precise. Hasam Miyadayim Kol Omine. No, there, of course he's responsible because he specifically he did it exactly the wrong way intentionally. So so it's the following Rameir, the Tanya Nishparo Kado below Silka. Let's say his jug breaks in the middle of the street and he didn't remove it. If his camel falls down and didn't stand them up, Rameir says he's chayav ben niska. He's responsible. He's exempt from man, liable for heaven. And then what are we talking about? The benisko posheu pligi. We're talking about whether or not if you slip, you're responsible. So we see from Rabbi Meir that even if you slip, we're going to consider you. That if you're not careful enough, we're going to consider you posheh, negligent, and not an accident. And so therefore, also a craftsman who messes up in the shlita, even if he does it for free, we're going to assume that you are negligent. If you're a craftsman who messes up if you're a butcher and you're an expert and you mess up, you're responsible. Even if he was an expert, like the butchers of Tziporo. Does Rabbi Yochanan really say that that's the case? There was an incident in the synagogue of Ma'on. And he said, bring me that they're an expert, that they know how to slaughter chicken. So we see from here that Rabbi Yochanan exempted you if you were an expert. So it says the Gemara, it depends if you did it. If they were doing it for free, then he exempted you. But if they were being paid, then he made them responsible. If you want the butcher to be liable, then you have to come along and pay him in advance. Meisvei, so the Gemara challenges this. That an expert should be responsible even if he does it for free, because it says when you give the guy wheat to grind, and he didn't moisten it first, and so therefore he messed up the wheat. Suban or Morrison, he made them bran, or a little bit less bran, kemach or nachtom, or if he gave flour to the baker, but also pasni poen, and he made bad bread, flaky bread, or behemot tabach v'nibor, you gave the animal to the butcher, and it became non-kosher. Chayavim neshu kenus. It's that even if you didn't pay him, it's like he's a hired worker and you're responsible. And so therefore, even if he's not paid, he's responsible. And the Gemara says, no, no, change the text, not because he's like a hired worker, but because he is a hired worker. And now the Gemara says, who magrumta the asla kamei. There was a person who was a magrumta. Basically, one of the psulei shlita, one of the disqualifications of the shlita is where you slaughter it outside the zone. That's called hagrama. But here we're talking about a case what's called hagrama b'miut simanim. You slaughtered most of the animal in the proper zone, and you completed it outside of the zone. The asla kamei de Rav utarfe. Rav said it was no good. It was improper. Patre v'tabach mi'lashlume. He said it's not kosher. Hagrama b'miut simanim. He paskin was not kosher. But he said the butcher doesn't have to pay. So Pago be Rav Kana Ravasi Behu Gavra. So that Rav Kana Ravasi met that man. Amalei Avid Bach Rav Tarti. Rav did two things here. What does it mean he did two things? My Tarti. Ilema Tarti Lagriu. So if you're going to say he did two things wrong, the Bailelach Shurek Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, because he should have allowed, you said it's kosher, who says that in the case of Hagrama B'miut Simanim, it's kosher, Utarfa Karabanan, and he said it's Treifa, or Inami Karabanan, or maybe he said it's like the Rabbanan, and also, even if Rav says like the Chachamim that it's not kosher, he should have said that the butcher has to pay. But it can't be that that's the case. Would he really be telling you like this? You can't, if you're a judge, you can't say, "Oh, I said you're innocent, but my friend said you're responsible." What can I do then? My friends outvoted me. You can't say if it's a closed vote. You can't say how people voted. No, so he did two things good. One, he said it's not kosher. He didn't want you to eat something that's possibly not kosher. And he said, don't pay him. So you thought he was ruling against you. He was really ruling in your favor. Say thank you to him. All right, we'll stop here. Chodesh Tov. We have to go down.